So back in 2018, I applied for my first teaching position, and I had hardly any resources online at that time about how to go about interviewing as a teacher. I did, however, find a blog about how to answer the interview question in all interviews, not teaching specific, about what is your greatest weakness during an interview. And when I read this article, I found a lot of interesting points. And since then, I've actually used strategies from this resource and kind of evolved it into how to confidently answer this question during a specifically teacher interview. So today I'm going to be diving into how to answer the question, what is your greatest weakness in a teacher interview? So with that being said, let's dive in. So like I said, when I first started teaching, or when I was looking for my first teaching position, it was back in 2018, and there weren't a lot of resources out there for teacher interviews. But I found that this resource was helpful, and it really helped me shift my mindset on how to go about the interview process. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is how to shift your mindset when it comes to this question. So at face value, what this question is it's asking you might think, okay, my biggest weakness is being too nice. And granted, if you take that in a literal sense, yes, you could answer the interview question that way, but it's actually asking something a little bit deeper. What it's actually asking you is, what is one of your greatest weaknesses, and can you turn it into your greatest strength? And are you capable of doing that? So let's talk about how to turn your greatest weakness into your greatest strength. And this is what I later termed or coined the term it factor. So what it is your it factor is what makes you stand out from all the other teachers who are applying to this district. And it's telling the district why they should hire you above anyone else. Now, when you go and figure out your it factor, what you're doing is you're looking at your greatest weakness and you're turning it into your greatest strength. What I notice is, I've also mentioned this throughout the interview. Check out last week's content if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But the more I mentioned this throughout the interview, the more confident I became. So much so that during my first job interviews, I actually had 2 different job interviews on the same day. I flew from Oregon to New Mexico. I got offered the teaching position for both jobs on the same day during the interview. So what I found was, the more you talk about what your greatest weakness is, the more confident you're going to be, and the more districts are going to see that this actually isn't a weakness. This can actually be very beneficial for them and for you too. So now that we talked about how to shift your mindset around this question and not going from a literal answer of, well, I'm terrible at classroom management, you can actually shift it into how this can be a benefit to the school and how you can use it to help you stand out from others. Let's talk about the wrong way to answer it. So there's a couple different ways that you could answer this, maybe in perhaps not the most prime way to answer this. Here's some examples. If I was asked, can you tell us what your greatest weakness is? I might say, I'm too young, I'm too new in the profession, I'm a first-year teacher, I'm too old. And you're just telling them your weakness and not adapting it to your greatest strength. So now that we talked about the wrong way to answer this, the very literal way to answer this, let's talk about a right way to answer this question. So if I were to be asked the question, what is your greatest weakness? I'm going to shift my greatest weakness into my greatest strength while answering this question. So let me give you a couple of examples. For example, if it's I'm too young, I can change it into, well, one of the greatest weaknesses or a disadvantage many people would consider me as is that I'm really young. At the time, I was 21 when I first applied to teaching, so I'm 21. However, I have found that being young has actually had a very very many benefits. For example, I am very eager to get into the profession, and I'm very eager to learn and get better. And so I'm very susceptible to feedback and training, and I may have had more recent research-based practices that I've learned as opposed to those who have maybe not been in college and haven't had up-to-date PD in a long time. So again, I turned my greatest weakness, which was I'm too young, I'm self-conscious about that, to my greatest strength. Next one, I'm too old. Well, my greatest weakness is I'm too old. That would be the wrong way to do it. Let's talk about the right way to do it. Well, a weakness many would consider, a disadvantage some might consider, is that my age. I may not be as young as I used to be in the profession. However, I consider my age to actually be a great strength because I'm happy to help others and lead others. I have been in the profession before, so I have that years of experience, and I know how to navigate some situations more appropriately and more efficiently now as opposed to when I first started due to that experience. I'm also happy to step up into leadership roles, and I'm happy to use my experience to mentor others and to really utilize my time management skills I've learned in past years to my advantage that maybe my peers who are in their first couple of years of teaching may not have that experience. So that would be an example. Another example could be, as opposed to saying I'm just too nice, one of the greatest weaknesses I would consider having is that I'm too nice. Some would consider that to be a disadvantage. However, I see that as a great strength because I'm very compassionate for my students because of insert personal experience here. Maybe you have disabilities, maybe you learned a second language, maybe you struggle with mental health, whatever it is here. But it's because of those experiences that I am able to reach and impact my students more deeply and build really strong connections with my students, as opposed perhaps my peers who haven't had those experiences. Maybe another example could be maybe you have learning disabilities or attention disabilities or what have you. You can turn that to one of the greatest weaknesses I would consider having would be that I have a blank disability. However, I have found in my years of experience that having this ability has actually provided me with opportunities to better relate to my students and build deeper connections. And I'm very compassionate and empathetic with their situation because I've personally been there. And that's a situation that not all teachers have an experience with. Maybe another example could be you're a first-year teacher. You're considering that as a bad thing. Instead, you can say a disadvantage I may have as opposed to other teachers is that I am a first-year teacher. However, I consider that a great strength because I'm happy for feedback and resources to grow. I'm quick to learn, I'm quick to implement, and I'm really looking for a district that I can stay at long-term and is going to help morph me into the teacher I want to be. I do have a lot to learn, but I'm eager to learn, and I do have a lot of training in the most recent research-based practices that perhaps many other teachers who have been in the profession for a long time may not have. I also have a lot of training in the newest technology, which again might be something that maybe other teachers do not have, but because I am a first-year teacher, I do have that experience and that knowledge. Another one could be this is your second career. Maybe you are in alternative licensing and you started off with a different career. A way you can go about using this as an advantage is one of the greatest weaknesses I consider myself to have is this isn't my first career. I've actually had another career in the past. However, I would consider that one of my greatest strengths because I have experiences and skills from that previous job, like strong communication skills, strong leadership skills, and the ability to oversee multiple tasks going on at once that maybe other teachers who are first year in this profession may not have. I also have strong communication skills, and I'm really passionate about collaborating with people in my team, and I feel like that's going to give me a slight advantage than those who may not have had the experiences that I have. Again, you can kind of expand to whatever strengths and skills you have based off of your career, your first career, but using that to your advantage and giving specific examples of what you had to do in that first career that you can then translate into your second career. So those are the different examples that you might have in regards to how to answer the question, what is your greatest weakness in a teacher interview? So now that we talked about that, let's recap what we talked about. So we talked about one of the ways, or the most important way, that you can answer what is your greatest weakness in a teacher interview is to first shift your mindset. Instead of literally answering the question, make sure to shift it from here is what others might consider a disadvantage, here's how I'm using it as a strength, or here is how actually that benefits me and the district I'm going to work for. The second thing we talked about was the wrong way to answer. I gave you examples of how to literally answer the question. And then next, we talked about right ways to answer the question. How can you take a specific thing, shift it from here's the disadvantage or weakness, here's how this is actually a strength. And the last thing, I actually gave you specific examples of some common things I've seen from not only teachers online who have reached out, but the teachers I've personally been hired to coach when it comes to preparing for their interview. How can they shift that into a strength? And I gave you the top weaknesses or disadvantages I commonly see and how we have shifted that into being strengths. So that wraps up how to answer the interview question, what is your greatest weakness in a teacher interview? If you want to dive deeper into teacher interviewing content, first off, I highly recommend you check out where you're tuning in from, because I have a ton of content in regards to teacher interviewing for free. One of the things I'm passionate about is when I first started, there weren't a lot of teachers sharing tips online. So it's been my passion to compile a huge resource of free content for teachers. So make sure to check that out, because I have over 140 now weeks of content for free that you can tune in, so definitely check that out. The second thing is, if you're kind of overwhelmed by the content, I know I have a ton now, and you don't want to sift through finding specifically the interview ones, I actually asked my audience and my community for the top 10 questions they had about preparing for an interview. I compiled those top 10 most commonly asked questions, and I covered them over 10 different weeks of content. Things like, what should I wear to an interview? How to prepare for a demo lesson? How to answer interview questions? Which interview questions to answer? And etc. Stuff like that. And then I put it in a guide. So in the guide, I list the top 10 most commonly asked questions I get about preparing for an interview or applying for a position. I give an answer, a blip or an excerpt of my answer. And then if you want a more detailed, in-depth answer, I actually link to additional blog posts, podcasts, and YouTube videos where I dive deeper into my answer, and I have a whole week's content on it. So that way you're not sifting through all of my resources, because again, I know I have a lot of content now and it's all in one place. So if you want to check out that guide, it's completely free. It's the Ultimate Teacher Interview Guide. Definitely check out the description. I'll have it linked there so you can go download it. It's yours, my gift to you, as a way to just kind of give you a boost and give you a starting place when it comes to the interview process as a teacher. The next thing I highly recommend you check out is I have 2 different resources. If you want someone to just write your resume or cover letter for you, or just to kind of give you a template, all you have to do is fill out, or you want me to tell you what to put in each section, everything from your cover letter, your resume, your resignation letters, your follow-up emails, your follow-up for an application, even a sample demo lesson template, I definitely recommend you check out the Ultimate Teacher Interview Bundle. In this bundle, I literally put all of the resources you're going to need for the interview process in one place. So definitely check that out if you're looking for a more DIY grab and go, and you already have the strategy, you just want help coming up with the resources quickly in a way that's going to make you stand out, show up confidently, and most importantly, save you time. I don't want you spending a ton of time on this. I would much rather help you find your dream district, apply quickly, get hired so you can spend time, researching your grade level and how to set up your classroom and the fun stuff like that. If you want to take it a step further, you want me to show you more of the strategy behind not only finding the right district from the get-go that you're going to feel supported in, so you're not feeling burned out 6 months down the road and contemplating leaving teaching, but you want to start off on the right foot right away, all the way to the follow-up and what to say during the interview and the demo lesson section. I have a mini course, Land Your Dream Job. It's a program that I absolutely love. I love the feedback I'm getting inside this program. What it is I take you through the entire process, the strategy, the mindset, how to show up confidently in a single weekend. This is potent, actionable steps. This isn't a fluffy course by any means. It is a step-by-step process on how to get from point A to point Z with the strategy and the mindset. And I have a lot of great bonuses in it, which I absolutely love. For example, I have an audio practice interview where I ask you the top 10 most commonly asked interview questions. I give you an example answer, and then I pause in the audio and I give you time to answer back to me what your answer is going to be. I even talk about how to come up with the right answers and how to show up confidently, which is really, really awesome. And then I even have demo lesson stuff that you can dive into there, and there's just a lot in there, which I really, really love. What I also love is there's 2 different options. If you are more of the, hey, I just need the strategies, but I don't really need your support in it, I want to do it on my own right now, you can definitely do that. There's also an option if you're wanting to look to hire me for like one-on-one coaching. Typically, my hourly rate for coaching is a lot higher than what you can get in this program. In this program, there's an option to get one-on-one coaching with me at a discounted price when you get the program. So I love that because I've had several teachers reach out, in fact, hire me for interview coaching, and I just bundled it together with this program. If that's an option, a different option you're looking for, I did put that in this program, which I absolutely love. So I have something at all different levels of whether you're DIYing completely or you want to hire me for one-on-one coaching to help you land your next teaching position or your first teaching position. So definitely check that out. I would love to have you join us inside the program. All right, that wraps everything up. Thank you so much for joining me. What is your biggest interview question? Let me know either in the comments if you see a comment section where you're tuning in from, or feel free to send me a DM on TikTok or Instagram. I love talking all things teacher interview. It has been a passion of mine, honestly, since my first year of teaching, and I got those 2 job offers on the same day. I found I'm actually kind of good at interviewing and I really enjoy it. So if you want to talk interviewing, definitely send me a DM. Otherwise, as always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.